So the Great Depression, what causes the Great Depression? There's a lot of things. And just like there were many things that caused the Great Depression, there are going to be many things that actually cause World War II to break out. Now, some of them are really big things. It's easy to see the impact that these events had on the world, and it's easy to see why they were causes of World War II. But then there are other smaller things that kind of get lost, and I don't know that we're really going to look at a lot of those things. But we will take a look at some things that caused World War II. Some might be surprising, some might not. Roosevelt does what to end the Great Depression? What does he try to do? He comes up with the New Deal. Y'all been working on that for, seems like forever now. You should have gotten anywhere from 62 to 65 counties, 155 projects. Does that end the Great Depression, though? No. In fact, Roosevelt's never able to get unemployment below what? 16%. And so in 1939, and I use 1939 as the end of the decade, and probably from some reading or from listening to somebody or watching something or, God forbid, reading something, you might have seen that World War II actually starts when? 1939. And so the New Deal does not end the Great Depression. And we've said all along, what does? World War II actually ends. It is the beginning of the end of the Great Depression in 1939. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, wait a minute, we didn't enter the war until when? 1941. But our trading partners, Great Britain, France, become involved in this war, and America actually becomes involved before 1941, not in a fighting way, and you're going to see that here in just a few minutes. So World War II. I wish that we could spend weeks and weeks and weeks on this. We can't. We want to focus basically on some key events during World War II, and then what did Georgia contribute to the war? How did it impact Georgia? And then we'll be done, hopefully by next Friday. So there are political and economic conditions in the world, particularly in Europe, after World War I that lead directly to World War II. Now, what ended World War I? What treaty? The Treaty of Versailles, and that's problem number one. That's condition, that's cause number one. This great document that was supposed to end the war to end all wars doesn't. It puts it on a 20-year hiatus. It pauses. It pushes the pause button for 20 years. It is a particularly harsh document toward the Germans. And if you'll remember, the United States doesn't sign it. They enter into individual treaties with the countries that fought during World War I. The Treaty of Versailles itself creates problems in Germany. And who gets blamed for those problems? America and the rest of Europe, particularly Great Britain and France. Yeah, but it's like, it's not my fault. It's his fault. He's the cause of all my problems. If I could just get rid of him, my life would be much simpler and better. It's his fault. And if it's not his fault, then it's his fault. He did it. In fact, I think it's all of y'all. So, I'm Germany. They're the Allied powers. It's their fault. Whose fault is it not? It's not the German people's fault. It's not Germany's fault. It's not the fatherland's fault. It's somebody else. All right. Kind of a neat little collage of some different stuff. What kind of jumps off the page at you? Anything? Reparations. What's that? $55 billion in 1920. Let's see if it's still on here. I have an idea. $723,288,500,000 today. Now, in 1920 Germany, that was a whole lot of money. In this classroom today, that's still a whole lot of money. And Germany will never pay it back. They can't. They begin to make reparations, but they can't do it. Yeah. You could buy a small country with that amount of money. You could certainly buy Montana with that. I know, because they got more money than anybody. But yeah, $55 billion. I mean, that's like going and, you're in a wreck and you tear up somebody else's car. It's your fault. And the insurance company sends you a bill for $55 billion. Or, there's no way. I can't pay that. And that's like Germany. There's no way. I can't pay that. If Germany had paid reparations, they would still be paying reparations today. And they can't do it. And in fact, this is from the New York World. And what does it say? Let's see you collect it. They're never going to collect it. And then what does America do to Germany and other European countries? Well, they make loans. That's a good thing, right? But then can they pay back those loans? No. Why? Because we're going to tax everything that comes to us from Europe. We're going to put tariffs on them. And so the reparations, ridiculous. And as a result, Germany really is kind of in the midst of the Depression before the Depression really hits. Their currency after the Great Depression begins is worthless. I mean, people are using it as toilet paper. I mean, think about that one for a minute. You got a stack of hundreds in the bathroom. Using Ben Franklin to wipe your tushy. It's terrible. Or, you're going to use it as wallpaper. Because it's not worth anything. We would never think about taking a stack of $100 bills and using them to light the fire in the fireplace, would we? Unless we've got $723 billion in the bank. So that's what happens in Germany. Nobody said anything about the red box. That's pretty important. I know you can't read it. Well, this is what the red box says. It says, according to the speech from Ferdinand Foch, who is the chief of France, who said this, he said, this is not peace. It is an armistice for 20 years. And if you look at the dates, the war ends in June of 1919. The Treaty of Versailles is actually signed in June of 1919. Fox says it's not peace, it's just an armistice for how long? 20 years. And when does World War II break out? Almost 20 years to the date. 20 years and some odd months. 1939. World War I or World War II breaks out. So it's kind of like hitting the pause button. You ever, most of y'all probably have some form of cable or digital TV that you can record directly to your whatever. Okay? You ever been watching something, you hit the pause button, you go off, maybe you're gone for hours and you come back and all you got to do is hit start and it plays, right? That's exactly what happens here in 1939. The pause button was pushed 20 years ago. And Germany pushes play. And it is not pleasant. All right. Oh, by the way, the picture. What do you think about my picture back there? It's not as good as, 4 children for sale, but it's pretty close. Can y'all see that very well? What do you think? Who are those people? They're women. They march very nicely, too. See those straight lines right there? Yes. This is what y'all are supposed to look like. You're supposed to look like a woman. These are actually what were called waves. The Army had whacks. The Navy had waves. And they are basically women who are going to take non-combat roles in the Navy. In other words, they're going to be clerks. They're going to be working in offices, doing that sort of thing. And I throw this picture up here because it's an interesting picture. All those women look alike, first of all, if you stop and look at it. What's missing in there? There are no African-American women. They're all white women. But I want you to tell me where that picture was taken. Anybody? Just garner a guess. Throw one out there. It was not Thailand. This wall here might give you a hint. It's taken on Davenport Field. Because Georgia College at that time was Georgia State College for women. It was turned into a wave training facility. And in fact, if you go to Georgia College's archives, if you can bribe your way in, you could do research on the years that women spent here training to go and serve the country. Anyway, just a neat picture I ran across one day. Thought, it's pretty interesting. All right. So the first thing is the Treaty of Versailles. The second thing we're going to call economic factors. Basically, the Great Depression. The Great Depression is not only ended by World War II, it is a cause of World War II. That time of unemployment, that time of low economic activity. And the three that are impacted probably greater than any others are Germany, Italy, and Spain. And then the third condition is nationalism. Nationalism led to fascism. And we'll talk about that term in just a sec. So it leads to fascism in Italy, it leads to fascism in Germany, and it causes Japan to colonize most of Asia. Japan actually conquers China. Let me see if I could. China. That's a horrible thing. I know. It was. And the Japanese were ruthless in how they treated the Chinese. There's a book sitting at home on my desk called The Rape. Anytime you hear that word, it ought to get your attention. The Rape of Nanking. And Nan is not Nanking, it's the city of Nanking. And terrible atrocities. Probably some of the worst things that happened during World War II. America turned to who? 1928, who was elected president? Or 1932, I guess. Yes, 32. Roosevelt's elected president. Why? He said what? I'll get you out of this. We're in a mess. We're in a pickle. I'll get you out of it. If you'll elect me president, I will get you out. And Germany and Italy and Japan, to a certain extent, turned to people unlike Roosevelt. They made the same promises, but Roosevelt, if you remember, I think we mentioned this, his first fireside chat, he said something to the American people. Does anybody remember what it was? The only thing, I think that was his fireside, or it might have been his inaugural address. I can't remember. I think it was his inaugural address. Is that right?
I know Kennedy said it also.
Yeah, but he borrowed it from Roosevelt. And I think it was his first fireside chat. And Roosevelt says the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He's saying there's nothing to be afraid of. We're going to get through this. We'll be okay. You know, how many of y'all have ever had a nightmare and you started screaming, mama came in, and did she go, oh, tell me about your nightmare? Yes, that's true. It's going to happen. The monster under your bed is going to come out and eat you. Now, I probably would have done that, but I'm sure your parents are much better than I am. They don't do that, right? They come in, they hug you, they soothe your fears. Listen, baby, it was just a nightmare. You don't have anything to worry about. The monster under your bed is not going to come out and eat you. Okay? And that's what Roosevelt does. Hitler and Mussolini don't come out and do that. They don't say everything's okay. They don't say there's nothing to be afraid of. They say, it's his fault. And his fault. And his and his and his and his. It's not your fault. It's their fault. You should be afraid of them. And they promise the same thing that Roosevelt does, because Roosevelt said what? I will return us to economic prosperity. I'll get everybody jobs. They do the same thing, but they do it in a different way. Yeah.
I'm actually doing a lot of research into fascism. I think we've seen a rise of it now. And it's a typical thing used by fascists to fear mongers, to make you afraid of something. And fascists normally want to stick to tradition. So the post-modernization of Europe and of the globalized world is something that they didn't like.
Yeah.
So in pushing that blame on somebody else, not only does it push a feeling of nationalism, but it makes it seem like we were in the right the whole time, they were in the wrong, and you elect me, and I will make them be punished for what they did to us.
I'll fix it.
It's us against them, and we've seen some modern day.
And you know, there was a lot of discussion about fascism and nationalism in the United States. You know, are we becoming a fascist nation? A country that's so focused on itself, because that's part of being a nationalistic or taking a nationalistic view. You're so focused on you and not anybody else. Yeah. And so what we see is Germany, you see the rise of Adolf Hitler. And Hitler, by the way, is a very dynamic person. You know, we think, well, how could so many people follow that one person? He played on people's fear. He said, I'll take care of things. It's his fault. I'll get rid of him, and that won't happen anymore. And that's what people wanted to hear. It's like Marvin Griffin running for governor in 1954. What did he promise people of Georgia he'd do? Keep segregation and keep the county unit system. He gives them what they want. And again, he's very dynamic, and he owns the military. Big part of it. In Italy, Benito Mussolini, again, very dynamic. He owns the military. There's a common theme here. Japan. Now, Japan's a different animal because Japan has an emperor. What's an emperor? 4-letter word. Starts with K. He's a king. But there's a difference between the monarchy in Japan and the monarchy in, say, England. The monarch in Japan is worshipped as a god. And they do have power. So Emperor Hirohito is not only the emperor, the king of Japan, he's also their god. And that's one of the reasons at the end of the war that General MacArthur does not try Hirohito for war crimes. He could not and would not have the Japanese people's god put to death. But Japan also has a prime minister, Hideki Tojo, and he's the one who's making most of these decisions. He has the blessing of the king, but he is putting things into place. He's the one responsible for taking over most of Asia in the late 1930s. So Japan's not really a dictatorship, it's a monarchy, but it's a special monarchy. Mussolini and Hitler, they're big buddies. I think they're holding hands in this picture. I'm not sure. They might be. Yeah, and Hitler will never be in a mustache or a facial hair competition for obvious reasons. Now, what is fascism? Fascism is a political philosophy. I mean, democracy is a political philosophy. Fascism is a form of government, basically. And it exalts the nation. Germany is number 1. You're number 8. We're number 1. We don't care about Poland. We're going to do the Blitzkrieg dance through Poland. Why? Because we're better than you. Yeah. We're better than you. And it is the government that is most important. It's the nation that's most important. What did we see in World War I? Did we see some nationalism? Is that one of the causes of World War I? Yeah. 20 years later, we get the same thing. You have a very centralized autocratic government. The government's all-powerful. Yeah.
I saw one thing. It said not all authoritarians are fascists, but all fascists are authoritarians. Because ideally, they want not necessarily a totalitarian where it's one party, but they want an authoritarian where it's one man, and they view that one man as who, like their Messiah, who will save them out of these tough times.
A centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader. Yeah. Now, you live in a dictatorship in here, right? But it's not a fascist dictatorship, is it? You know, if you tell me something's terrible, I'm going to pay attention to you. I think. I mean, that's why it took us 15 days to do a map, right? Because by God, we were going to have it done on Thursday. Well, it didn't happen. But there's economic regimentation. The government might, not necessarily, but might control industry, control certain industries. Yeah. One of the big things, and we see this in World War II repeatedly, is German commanders, German army commanders, naval commanders, they have to ask permission from Hitler to do things. That is no way to run a war. The Americans, on the other hand, their commanders are, they have autonomy. They can make decisions. They can act without having to call President Roosevelt. Franklin, can we invade Sicily tomorrow? They just did it. Now, the president knew what was going on, but he let them make their decisions. In the field, they were free to make their own decisions. That was not necessarily true. The Italians, they were terrible. Mussolini was terrible. He ends up dead. There's a common theme there. And if you don't agree with a fascist government, what happens to you? You disappear. Yeah. Possibly. So, I think I gave you these cartoons. And that brings us to really cause number 4, appeasement and isolationism. And neither was a very good approach to the world. Our first cartoon over here kind of explains appeasement. You've got, this is England in the middle here. Winston Churchill is not the Prime Minister of England at this time. It's Neville, yeah. is the prime minister, and his approach to Germany is, well, in the cartoon, remember, one more lollipop, and then you all go home. Your parents have probably done that with you. Okay, one more story, and then you got to go to bed. Okay? More and more and more. One more lollipop. Okay, guys, one more lollipop, and then you promise to go home, so go home. Yeah, no, well, and that's Europe. Got to stop. Okay. All right. France says, okay, we'll give you the Rhineland back, but that's all. No more. And does it work? No. And then there's America. America is not using appeasement. They're using isolationism. If we ignore it, it'll go away. And then Dr. Seuss's fantastic cartoon here. Get your ostrich bonnet here. Relieves Hitler headache. Why does it relieve the Hitler headache? If I can't see it, it's not going to happen. It's not real. And what our ostriches supposedly do when they become frightened, stick their head in the sand, and it doesn't work. They just get eaten without seeing what's going to eat them. When they're really fast, they could run away. They don't really do it, but and Seuss writes, we always were suckers for ridiculous hats. Yeah. So the United States isolates itself. And by the way, we had done that previously, and it didn't work out very well for us. It's interesting to note that since 1945, we have not practiced isolationism. Some people wish we would practice isolationism. They want us to leave us, want us to leave them alone. Zach is in Djibouti. He's coming home. He flies out tomorrow. Did I tell you the story that he told me? They have drones everywhere. Did I tell you the story about the two guys in the mud puddle? Yeah. And why are we there? Because of those two guys fighting in the mud puddle. We're there because the people of Somalia don't know how to govern themselves. And we're trying to help them. Of course, I think we pulled out and said, no, you're on your own now. But we're everywhere. Why? Because we realize isolationism will not work. And then a couple of things. America first. This idea of let them take care of themselves. We need to worry about us. Keep the U.S. out of war. So appeasement and isolationism are two other causes of World War II. Now, I think I put this in your notes. What is the meaning of the cartoon on the left? Who or what does each character represent? So who is this? Mussolini, Hirohito, Hitler, and 1942 is what? That's the new year, right? 1942. And if you read the book down here, it says David and Goliath, and David slew the giant. And then just wait until the little feller grows up. What happens in 1942 and 1943? The little feller starts to grow up. Yep. All right, dudes. Good deal.